Alright guys, and welcome back to Forza Motorsport 6. This is Car Wars episode 10, and in this episode it's old versus new with the Ford GTs. First up we're going to have the 2005 Ford GT. This car comes with a supercharged V8 engine that produces 550 brake horsepower and 500 pounds-foot of torque. So let's see how this car performs on track. Alright guys, and here we are with the 2005 Ford GT at the Rio de Janeiro circuit. Of course this car does have a V8 engine, so we can expect some wheel spin off the line, and of course that was due to me being a wee bit too forceful with the throttle. Trying to put down a wee bit too much power, and I spun up the wheels, but this car is of course now picking up speed. The tyre widths on this car are smaller than those of the 2017 model. Coming through that tunnel, and the engine really does roar throughout it. It's very nice. This car doesn't stop at all. Holy shit. Wow, it just does not stop at all. It's a pain in the ass. It's very planted and it's very solid through the corners, but fuck me, right? This is unbelievable. This car is just bouncing around like a fucking big piece of shit. Doesn't want to stop. It just doesn't feel as solid as it should. Even kinda rolls about a bit in the corners. Of course this is a sports car, and it really should, or a kind of a supercar type thing, it really shouldn't be doing that. This car can of course top out at over 200 miles per hour. However, it would have been nice if Ford fitted this thing with brakes and not two bin lids. It's unbelievable, it doesn't want to stop at all. You know, you're really jamming on the brakes and this thing just locks up and then starts to skid. So we're across the finish line with basically what is a 2 minutes, and holy shit, you can't carry much speed through those corners. This car just slides about. Maybe it's my fault, I haven't been on this in a while and I'm still trying to get used to how this car actually feels. It is the first time ever driving the 2005 Ford GT on the Forza Motorsport 6. Last time I actually drove this car was back on Forza Motorsport 4. It's just one of those cars I never really was interested in. I just kind of ignored it. I did like what it looked like, I did like how it sounded, I was just not really interested in it. I would prefer to watch it on maybe Top Gear, or you know, whenever Jeremy Clarkson was driving it, but I never really, I wasn't really fond of it. However, there's a lot of dials and this interior looks very retro. I do like the interior of the new Ford GT a lot more. It kind of looks a lot more race car like. This looks retro and kind of a bit of a throwback to the original GT40 of the 60s. Obviously they must have borrowed the brakes off that fucking thing too, because this car braking performance is shocking. But then again, this car does weigh a lot. This car is 3,390 pounds in weight. It's a big bitch. It's a big fucking bitch. And coming out of that corner, yeah, slightly sideways. So it's heavy, has small tyres, brakes are shit. What does this car actually have going for it? Just power and top speed. That's really it. You know, we're through that lap at 1 minute and 48 seconds. Obviously we couldn't have done any worse on the first lap, but we've only got one lap left to really give this car something to, you know, contend with the new model. Through that corner, I braked a bit hard, locked up the rear wheels and put the car sideways. Even there I was trying to brake late. It just doesn't stop. You either put on too much braking force or not enough in this fucking piece of shit. The brakes are usually just locking up. It's a bollocks. You can see why this car's a fucking A-class. You know, for a car that does over 200 miles per hour to be a fucking A-class, you can just expect that there's something wrong with the way that it corners or performs. You know, my Ford Fiesta feels better than this. This thing's just a boat. But it sounds nice, and it looks nice. Maybe that's what Ford was going for whenever they designed it. Drives like shit, but it looks pretty cool. Of course this is on the controller, so maybe that's what it is. Maybe, you know, maybe this car would be much better if you had a steering wheel and pedal setup where you'd be able to control your braking much more effectively. However, on a controller, the slightest touch of the trigger and the brakes are basically on. You know, controllers just aren't suited for racing games, but we're approaching the finish line. This has been a shitty race, it really has. But we're across the line with a fastest lap of 1 minute 48.998. I was expecting more. I actually expected this car to be slightly faster, however it was not. Anyway guys, we're going to get the 2017 Ford GT out here and see how it performs on track and see if it beats this model. But I'll see you back in a second. Alright guys, and we are back with the 2017 Ford GT. Of course this car has a different type of engine. It has a twin turbocharged V6 engine that produces 630 brake horsepower and 539 pounds-feet of torque. This car is also 500 pounds lighter than the 2005 model Ford GT, so I have no doubts that this car will be faster on the track. And now we're coming down into this tunnel. Oh, the sound of this engine is unreal. You know, I was one of those kind of Ford purists that whenever I heard this was going to be a V6 engine, I was like, what? You know, what are you fucking thinking here? It sounds amazing whenever those turbochargers get spooling up. However, there is a lot of lag with the turbochargers. You know, you have to wait a long time before the car is producing maximum boost. So, of course, maybe a naturally aspirated V8 engine might be able to keep up with it for a short period of time. However, this car does pick up speed incredibly fast regardless of the twin turbocharger setup. Also revs the way out the 7,000 RPM. Doesn't get stopped very well. Yeah, maybe it's just me driving, but fuck, I don't know. Even slowing, yeah, just slowing down slightly for that corner. I don't like the way this track is so bumpy. It does kind of put the car off balance and throws it about, which is unfortunate, but you know what happens. You just kind of have to deal with it. Coming down there, and it was better. It wasn't exactly amazing, but it was definitely better than some of the attempts at that corner. Like the way the wee bar for the car's revs changes colour as it approaches the red line. It's pretty cool. Like that. Wonder if that actually happens in real life. It would be pretty interesting to see if it does, but you know, obviously I'm not really going to be inside one of these things. Don't exactly get them over here in Northern Ireland. Regardless, we just have to keep on continuing, just keep on pushing this car as hard as we possibly can. Trying to brake as late as possible so that we can maximise the speed. Oh shit. Bloody hell. That was fucking atrocious there. And we're across the line there with a 1 minute 40. This car's 8 seconds faster than the 2005 model Ford GT on the second lap there, so we'll see if we can make it faster on this last go around the track. Hopefully we do. We kind of understeered a bit wide, brought the car in too tight at the start and messed it up. This is the fucking worst corner in all of Forza Motorsport. I don't understand why they ever made it that way, but it's a pain in the ass, it really is. It's a shit corner. Coming in through this tunnel, best bit of this track, definitely, by far. Love the way it makes a car echo. Really emphasises the sound of that twin turbo V6. Nothing better than a turbocharged engine. Of course, it would be interesting to see if they would ever do a twin turbo V8. Probably not, you know, for fuel economy and all that. bullshit, but it would just be interesting, be pretty cool. Yeah, didn't feel too bad through those corners. I actually quite enjoy the way this car feels once I get into it. You just have to be a wee bit cautious on the corners because this car does pick up speed incredibly quick, and sometimes you're carrying more speed into a corner than you actually think you are, and I think that's maybe why I was caught out numerous times. But one main difference between this car and the previous 2005 Ford GT is the fact that it has a semi-automatic transmission, whereas the last GT actually had a manual 6-speed. However guys, we're across the line there with a 1 minute 40. That's really good. I believe I could do better. I believe that was not the best that I could possibly produce, but I did quite enjoy driving both of these cars. The 2005 sounds really good. You know, I like V8 engines, they just have a unique sound to them, they sound really nice. But at the end of the day, the V6 twin turbocharged engine was far superior, not only because it has more power, but because it's also more modern. You know, the suspension setup, the way the car's aerodynamically designed, it's just much better. I would be surprised if the 2005 Ford GT beat the 2017, but it was never really going to happen due to the technological advances between both cars. However guys, I've had fun driving these cars. I hope you've enjoyed watching the video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.